In one of the previous videos, I was talking about some important things that I believe are needed to remember if you want to work with the university for your innovation research project or any business project that you have in mind. And I promise there will be the second video where I talk about more practical tips on how to find a university partner for your project. Well, that's the second part. And today I will be talking about how I am looking for university partners for scientific projects. I'm going to share where I'm looking for them, where I'm looking for the right team, and how I connect with them, how I connect with professors from these teams. I'm going to share the email template that I use, and here my marketing background is quite beneficial, and which information you should pay attention to. Now, I want to highlight that this is my experience. I've been working with around 30 universities, different universities from the whole world over the past 6 years, and I was in communication with many more of them. And this is how I do things, okay? How I do them for collaborative projects that I manage. Obviously, some companies might do it differently, and there are companies that work with universities constantly. There are companies that have partnerships with them, etc., etc. But this is the way I use, and companies and managers that don't really have a wide network of universities or are looking how to extend this existing network, they might find something useful in this approach. Hello everyone and welcome to my channel. My name is Lisa and I spent 5 years organizing collaborative university competitions for world well-known companies, helping them to solve their extreme innovation challenges. And now I continue my journey with the goal to foster innovation by helping different parties of the innovation process collaborate and co-create. On this channel, I explore collaboration projects for innovation management, share my experience in managing these projects and processes, and uncover strategies for making collaboration efforts more effective. Now, the first and probably one of the most important things on the way to landing a partnership with the university is defining the challenge for your research project if you haven't done it already, and you need to define the final goal, what you're trying to achieve by conducting the project, and you need to have a list of criteria, a list of expectations for the final solution. And I suggest that you already have it before you go to look for a university partner. And I suggest that you prepare a brief PDF based on this information. It would be very, very helpful. It is good to include some technical details of the solution you're looking for, the challenge, of course, the challenge that you have, approximate timeline of the project if you already have it in mind. You also need to include some background information about the specific product or the specific service you work on the solution for, and something that does not require signing an NDA. You might also include limitations that you might have. For example, you don't want to use specific materials or you want to stick to your production method, etc. So, all the information that you're going to include should be quite brief, but it should describe what you want to get at the end of the process, what you're looking for. It should provide all the details, and if something is important for the solution you're looking for, you need to include this information. And of course, if you have some specific details about how the process is going to look like, for example, you expect the team coming to your office, coming to your lab or something like that, if you have it in mind, you need to also include this in your PDF. I also recommend sharing details about legal questions like intellectual property rights. For example, if you expect to own the patent at the end of the process. Also, when it comes to money, how much the team might get to the project, I usually always mention this information, but that's our case of collaborative projects, like of the hackathons that we conduct, because the amount that we are paying to universities, it cannot be changed. We cannot negotiate it in different ways. So that's why I prefer to be open about this information. But in your case, when it comes to kind of one-on-one collaboration process, if you are open to negotiations, I believe that you might mention the amount that you have in mind. It might be helpful, but you should also say that, yeah, you're open to negotiations if you're open. And also, if you can offer to the team something else like long-term partnership or a job for PhD students, I do believe that it's also good to include in this PDF document. Now, why is it important to prepare such a PDF file? First of all, I believe it will already help you to identify the initial disciplines and research areas you should tackle with your project, narrow them down, and approach the most relevant teams first. So this file is helpful for you. Then it's also, of course, helpful for the universities you're going to approach, and you will be able to present this information to the team straight away, which will allow them to make a decision whether they are able to help you, whether they are the right candidates for you, whether they accept the terms that you propose. So you're not going to waste your time on trying to persuade the team that does not agree to participate or that cannot help you with your project. And of course, it's going to make your objectives clear from the very start for everyone, for you, for your team, for the research team. And it's gonna make it easier for the whole process because you will have in front of you what you're looking for, what you want to get at the end, and you will focus on achieving this goal. Once you make a decision about the objectives, about what you're trying to achieve, about the criteria for the solution, you may start looking for the universities to partner with. And of course, the focus point here would be professors to collaborate with. I was talking about it in my first video. We're not looking for the university, we're looking for the team, for the person that has knowledge, that has information that will be valuable for your project. And to find the right people, you need to, first of all, write down a list of disciplines that the team you're looking for should be master of. Include here a list of keywords, research interests that are connected to these disciplines. You can start with very specific and niche phrases that are connected to your product, to the solution you're looking for, but also prepare a list of kind of wider keywords that you could use later in the process. Then you should also think about leading professors in your area that you would want to collaborate with, and you need to write them down as well. Then you need to find their profiles on the university's websites and websites like Google Scholar and ResearchGate. It's going to also help you to find additional research interests to use for your search, and it will just give you a kind of a portrait of a person, of their knowledge and of the technologies that they use, something that you really need to look for in other people. Now, think also about adjacent areas. Think about other fields that on a basic level might be connected to your field, in which areas you might have similar processes or materials, and teams from such fields might be very beneficial for collaborative projects, as they might bring knowledge and technologies for solving your problem from their areas. You know, it's like how Henry Ford came up with mass production. He didn't really invent it, he just combined elements from other industries. And here you would also need to prepare a list of keywords for those adjacent areas as well, and that's what I also usually do for collaborative projects that I manage. Now, when it comes to where you need to look for relevant researchers, there is a number of different options, and the option number one that you usually use is my own network. This is the very first place that I start looking for relevant teams. Even if I cannot remember a single person I know working in the area, there might be a chance researchers I worked with in the past might know them. And this would be the best way to find a relevant team, in my opinion, because basically then you will already have a person that might introduce you to someone you are looking for. Then, of course, another option here is portals like ResearchGate and Google Scholar and Scopus, where you are able to find publications and information about publications on any topic, on any research area. Personally, I like starting with ResearchGate, which is like a network for a scientific community. And the reason I like this portal is because once you find a particular researcher that interests you, again, based on the publication that you found, or you can just go to a leading researcher in your area that you have already prepared before. You know, you remember the list that I mentioned, that you need to have a list of leading researchers from your area to help you with your search. And you can just go to their profile and you can immediately find a list of their co-authors. You can check their network, and you can also see those who cited their publications. And it will already allow you to find new potential candidates for your challenge. But I also like to use Google Scholar to find relevant publications, because I believe their database is somehow bigger than the one that they have on the ResearchGate. Now, the way that I do my search is just by using the keywords that I prepared on the previous step. I start with the more niche and the most relevant keywords, of course, and I'm just looking for the publications. Once I find a relevant publication, I just see a list of the authors and I can just add them to my list of potential researchers that I want to connect with later. You should pay attention to the year of the publication. You don't want to find something that is extremely old. It's not going to be helpful here. Now, I don't want to say that working with these portals like ResearchGate and Google Scholar and Scopus is the best way to do things. I don't want to say that. It's just the way I'm used to, but probably going via specific journals that have the most relevant publications to your area is the best way to start things. Now, another source where you can find relevant publications and thus relevant researchers is portals like PubMed that are focused on specific areas, so it might also make sense to go through their publication, something that they have on their portal first before actually going to ResearchGate. There are also portals like Taylor and Francis Online, MDPI, Science Direct, where you might find relevant journals and perform searches based on these journals. And often when I find myself in a situation when I went through all the interesting publications that I found on ResearchGate and Google Scholar, I go to these portals and I start my search again within these specific journals, for example, like Advanced Membranes or Polymer Science, or any topic that I really need, any area that I need. And I just find another world, like another dimension of relevant publications and relevant researchers, of course. So I also recommend to use those. Now, there is also Google Patents for search based on patents, and it might be very useful if you're looking for a solution that might be more ready for commercialization, for scaling up. And there you might find patents and the researchers that filed these patents on technologies that you might be interested in. Another way to find relevant teams and relevant researchers is conferences. And it doesn't really mean that you should go to these conferences, but you might have a list of them that are dedicated to a relevant topic. And you might find, usually for such conferences, you might easily find a list of attendees, a list of participants, and basically you have a list of researchers that you can also contact online. But of course, going to conferences, in my opinion, is a great way to establish connections. And if you want to establish some long-term partnership or like find interesting teams, you should definitely go there. Of course, we have social networks like LinkedIn or Xing in Germany. and it might be another tool to look for university researchers. Now, the main problem with LinkedIn is that there are not that many scientists there, and not that many mention their research areas and their publications. So it's quite a limiting factor, but when it comes to establishing a contact, this might be the best choice, as people on LinkedIn are naturally more willing to connect with you and accept your request and talk to you about your project. And it's definitely not gonna land in their spam folder like it might happen with an email that you send. So I usually use LinkedIn as my very last option when I'm kind of losing hope, and again, because of limitations. But you can give it a try and you might find some great connections there. Another way to find academic teams to work with is local associations, and I believe it might be quite beneficial for small and medium companies that have never collaborated with universities before. You will have a chance to establish connections with academic researchers from your area straight away, and it will be just easier to organize and manage this project. Moreover, as we are talking about local organizations, I was reading this paper that is called Failed and Successful Innovations: The Role of Geographic Proximity and International Diversity of Partners in Technological Collaboration the other day, and I'm going to share the link to this publication in the description. It might be very interesting to read. And this paper, the authors of this paper did a research on how geographic proximity and international diversity of collaborative project partners contributes to success and failure of the innovation project. And they came to a conclusion that working with a domestic partner and having only one partner contributes more to success, and this contribution is significant. That means if you want to have a successful innovation project and you have never worked with international partners, with universities from abroad, and you have never worked with a number of partners for one project, it might be better to start with a local university, with a local academic partner. Of course, it's much more difficult to work with a range of partners, and partners coming from other countries, not the ones from your location, because it's just more difficult to manage the whole thing. It's more difficult to organize the processes, of sharing information. There are cultural and technological differences. So probably if you have no experience in working with external partners from abroad, I suggest that you start with finding a local university team, a university from your country, or at least somewhere close to your location. And personally, I had great experience with working with universities from different countries. But again, also this is due to my experience. This is also due to the processes that we have. So that's easier for me, but for the start, you might find something nearby. And as we're talking about local universities, the very last thing that you can do is to prepare a list of universities from your location and just go to their websites one by one, looking for relevant departments, looking for relevant professors from these departments. And yeah, that's, if the list is not that long, it might be an okay way, and it might be the simplest thing to start with. Now, there is also one thing that I want to mention here. I would not recommend using ChatGPT or any other generative AI tools, because they do not provide deep results and they might suggest false information. Even this tool, Perplexity AI, that usually do the search based on the information that they can find in the web, it might provide some initial results, some initial information about relevant publications or researchers, but you cannot really expect a detailed overview. You might have a list of maybe 10 authors, but you usually need more than that in your list of relevant researchers you want to approach. Now, apart from the universities, there are also different research institutions. They might be different in different countries. Does it make sense to work with them? Yes, absolutely. Absolutely, it does make sense to work with them and to look for relevant research teams from these institutions. For them, usually it's important to work with the organizations, with the industry, so they will probably be more open to collaboration with you, and their research will be more applied and again more suitable for scaling. So you might also want to consider teams from such organizations for your collaborative project. Now, I have mentioned a number of different sources where you can find relevant publications based on the list of the keywords, and you might find these publications and the authors of these publications. So what do you do with this whole information? Basically, you start creating a list of researchers whose publications caught your attention. Now, you can create an Excel file where you would mention their names, position, departments, research interest, publications, emails, and phones. And if emails and phones are readily available in publications, emails, they usually provided, but if you cannot find it, it's quite easy. You can just Google this researcher and find their page on the university website. And phones and emails, like in 99% cases, will be on the university websites. So you just add this information to your table, where you can also find them on LinkedIn, and you can add the link to their LinkedIn page to connect with them on LinkedIn. You can also rank them. For example, A would go for the most relevant researchers, the ones you're most interested in. Then it would be B, for example, for researchers that you're less interested to work with, but they are still relevant. And for example, C for researchers from adjacent areas. And then, based on this rank, you might start approaching researchers from the list, and you might want to start with the A category. Then if it doesn't bring any results, then you go to B, and so on. And yeah, this is like, this whole information, this whole database is going to be very helpful when you start approaching these researchers, when you start preparing emails and messages to send. I do recommend to add mostly professors to this database, but sometimes it also might make sense to write not to a professor, but to a postdoc or a PhD student. So you might want to add them to your list as well, because if your approach to a group professor didn't bring any result, you could try to contact a postdoc or a PhD student. They might be more open to this connection, and it just might be easier to establish this contact with them. Now, again, I mentioned it in my previous video, and I want to mention it again in this one. You're not looking for a great university, okay? You're not looking for a university from top 100. You're looking for a great team that would solve your problem, and this team might be coming from an institution you have never heard of. This is just something to remember. Also, before we get to the topic of writing an email, I want to mention that there are some platforms that allow you to connect with researchers you need, or where you can publish a challenge and you will get proposals from the researchers. I don't know, like, if I can really recommend any of those. I have never really worked with them. I've never used it, but maybe you might find them helpful for your project. I know that large companies work with them, and I assume it might cost quite some money to go with these platforms, so probably it won't be cheap. But why not? This website like Yet2 or Inagat or Haley is becoming quite popular as well. So yeah, you can try to use these platforms as well. But okay, let's imagine that you already have your database, your list of researchers that you want to connect with for your project. Now, there are a couple of things that I want you to remember. And first of all, you need to remember who they are and where they're coming from, their countries, their positions. Universities from some countries are less likely to answer, it's quite normal. For example, I find it quite difficult to connect with universities from South Korea and Japan. And I know that if the company does not have representatives in these countries, it's quite challenging, but I would still try. If you found a relevant person, a relevant researcher from one of these countries, I would still try to connect with them. I had a chance to work with a Japanese professor, and we worked with a number of Chinese universities, and I can say that their work ethics is just impeccable, Keeping all that in mind, you might want to use some local attributes in your email. For example, Japanese honorifics. It just increases the chances to get a response from them. So this is just something to keep in mind. Keep in mind their local traditions, their local peculiarities. You might want to use them in your email. Now, the next point to remember is their research interest and other interests as well, what they're working on and what they might be interested to get from your collaboration. And I'm talking here about something that I mentioned in my previous video, like why these professors and their research teams would even be interested to work with you. It's just something to remember, something to keep in your mind when you are writing an email to them. Another thing that I want to mention here is the timing, of course. Holidays, vacations, exam time, this is something to keep in mind, because obviously the timing might not be right and the professor might be just busy or they might be on vacation, so your email might end up being buried in their inbox. Timing is important, so if you see that there is like the vacation time or the holiday time, it's just better to write an email a bit later. Also, remember that at this very moment, you are the one who is more interested in them than they are in you. You're the one approaching them, You need to think about it, what you can give to them. This will just help to set the right tone of your email. And now I'm going to show you the template that I use for my emails. It might change over time. I do tweaks here and there. And yeah, but this email is basically about a common sense. There is nothing like super specific. I don't want you to use it like the way it is, but it will just give you a sort of like a structure for your email so that you can create your own email, your own message for the researcher. And I start, of course, with the professor's name, and I always write very politely, keeping in mind who I am to them. And I'm a stranger, and I'm also someone who is asking for their services. In most cases, these people are older than me. They're more experienced. I don't have any experience in science. So, I need to be very polite. Then I, of course, explain why I'm writing to them. I explain the idea of the project, share some details, this and that. And I, of course, mention either the area of their research and the publication that caught my attention, where they explain the technology I might be interested in that might be potentially helpful for the project. And it shows what exactly from their experience I find valuable. I might make mistake. I'm not an expert. I'm not a scientist. And of course, I don't know whether this technology, whether this publication and this knowledge might be adopted for the collaborative project that we conduct. But I think it's just might be nice to show that you actually went through their publications and their interests, but you really need to go through their publications. You need to at least have some sort of an understanding of what they're doing. It's not about faking it. It's about actually going through what they're interested in. Now, the description of the project and what we're looking for, it should definitely go somewhere at the beginning of the email, because this basically provides a reason why they shouldn't delete your email. Then I, of course, would introduce the company. I would explain what we do. And here, big and well-known brands have an advantage. And, maybe for big companies, it might make sense to put the name of the company in the very first sentence and in the email name. But it really depends on the professor you are trying to approach and the university, because if they have their own big brand, their name is big in the scientific community, they might not care about how big your company is. I then mention information about the project, a bit more details here. I also attach a small PDF file that we prepared on one of the previous steps to let them know about all the details about the process, about the criteria. It's also important to explain what exactly we expect from them at the end of the project and give this information straight away. Again, here you might also add a sentence about what you offer in return, like financial reward, like long-term partnership that I mentioned, like job opportunities, etc. And then I ask them, of course, if this is something that they're interested in, and I suggest to have a call to discuss the project, to share more details. I also might find references to collaborative projects that we conducted in the past. And if you have anything, if you could add anything here, you can probably mention it here. If you don't have any references, don't mention it at all, just forget about it. It's totally fine. But in general, do not overshare, do not write a long email. Nobody is reading long emails nowadays. And yeah, just brief, focused, important information about the project and what the researcher, what their team might get from it. But in general, most of the details should be provided in PDF file. Then when it comes to sending the email, I don't use any mass mailing tools. I honestly think this is the most stupid thing that you can do for such an email. It's not something that I use in such cases. I always send it manually from my company email. Again, like, I'm a marketer, I know how mass mailing works. I just don't find it good to use in such a case. Now, when it comes to the name of the email, the title, I don't know, just add something like collaborative project and briefly describe what this project is about. So the name should be quite short, but have the most important information. I also want to quickly mention about why you might not get a response or you might get too many negative answers, and what to do if most of the teams that you're trying to connect with, they don't want or they can't join your project. And there are many reasons why you can get a no. The team is working with another company already, or the professor is retired. Sometimes it happens, or they're busy with projects in general. They're not interested, they cannot help. There are many different reasons, and in this case, if you get responses, you at least understand the reasons, and this is like totally fine. If some teams cannot work with you, you just continue looking for the team that would agree to work with you. You might want to tackle some other geographic locations, Sometimes you need to work with the team from abroad, so it's totally fine. If you don't get any response, here, there might be different reasons, but that means that you should change something. Something is not working here. Maybe your email is too long. Maybe the topic is irrelevant. Maybe you found irrelevant researchers, Maybe you need to add more details to your description. So you need to change something. You're either approaching wrong contexts or something is wrong with your email. Now, if the person you're approaching does not respond, you might send 1-2 follow-up messages. I don't do more of them. I think it's ridiculous to send more than 3 messages to one person. If they do not respond, they are clearly not interested. Usually in these follow-up messages, I briefly ask if they received my previous email and whether they're interested in the project, and usually that's more than enough. But yeah, these 2 rounds of follow-up, they might bring quite good results actually. Now, apart from emails, there are calls. And when it comes to calls and calling professors instead of sending them emails, I'm a millennial, okay? Like, I don't call people until it's absolutely unavoidable and necessary. I tried calling professors at the beginning of my career when they didn't respond to my emails, and honestly, it didn't make any difference for me. So I do really prefer to send an email or a message on LinkedIn, and I feel like it's more of a polite way of communicating nowadays, because you don't disturb the person on the other side. So that's how I usually do, and they can respond to your message when they have time. Now, when it comes to sending LinkedIn, you send the first connection request, and there is like a very brief note that you have on LinkedIn, and there you can again just mention that you're looking for a partner for your collaborative project, and you can mention the topic, the area of your project in this brief note. And then once they accept your request, you can send them the PDF and ask whether they are interested to talk more about this project or not. Now, this is it for today, and in this video I believe I explained everything that I wanted to explain. I gave you some practical information about how to find relevant teams, and I will do the 3rd video on this topic where I'm going to share what you should pay attention to when you are choosing the team to work with, what red flags are, what green flags are, and like all of those things. And yeah, I hope that I did not forget anything that I usually do when I'm looking for a university partner to work with. Now, if you have any questions, or if you have a challenge in your mind and you'd like to find a university team for this challenge, you can just text me, you can connect with me on LinkedIn, and maybe one of my connections, the researcher I worked with in the past, could help you with this challenge. I'd be happy to help you connect with them, and I believe this is like my mission, and I want this to be my mission, to help great companies find great researchers, great academics, scientists, and help them work together. And I'd just be happy to answer any questions you might have about looking for university researchers or about collaborative projects. So yeah, I hope to see you in the next video, and I wish you a great day. Bye!